Over the past few years at New City Church, I've discovered a few random things that helps me be more effective in what I'm doing. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to give you 5 surprising tips for pastors.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement. All 3. It's crazy. To help you plant and grow healthy churches, my name is Brennan Drosian, and joining me today is Dylan Dotson. And today we're talking about 5 surprising, not normal, but surprising, shocking tips for pastors.
These are some things over the course of a little over 2 years since we've started that I have learned. They're kind of random things that actually help me, I feel like, do a better job of what I'm doing. And so some of these things you might be like, that makes sense, but I never thought of it. Some of the things maybe not. But these are just things that I would encourage you, if you are a pastor or a church leader, staff member, to consider and try. And I've found that I've liked them. So
maybe you will too.
Maybe you will too. Number 1, and this may seem obvious, but I'll explain what I mean, that you should preach in clothes that you're most comfortable in. Now, of course,
basketball shorts.
Yeah. Obviously, you want to be appropriate.
Yeah.
But you also, like, all of us have clothes that, whatever your style is, I'm not saying it needs to be a particular thing.
Yeah.
But whatever your style is, whatever you like to wear, like, you should preach in those things. I have found that when I'm wearing clothes that I don't really like, that don't really fit me the best or whatever, that kind of affects how I prepare, how I feel when I'm on stage. And it's not that you're cognitively, not literally,
cognizant?
Cognitively thinking about it. I don't know if that's a word, as you're preaching. But just like the whole day, you feel a certain way when you look a certain way. And that may seem cheesy, but it's just something that I've noticed. And so, like, for me, I'm kind of in between a medium and large because I'm tall and skinny. So, like, for example, this may be really practical. Medium clothes fit me better, but they're too short. Large clothes are too baggy, but they're long enough.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, I was like, never feel comfortable. Now I've gotten like, this is how important I think it is. I've bought large, I can't even speak, buy large clothes and I get them tailored to fit me, like shirts, like button-up shirts. Not because I like want to look a certain way, whatever, but when I feel comfortable, when I'm not like conscious of like, this is baggy or this is short, whatever. And I know the average person probably is not paying attention to it, but how I feel based on like what I'm wearing makes a big difference. And so for me, it's typically a button up, whether it's a long sleeve or short sleeve, whether it's a t-shirt for you, a style of pants that you wear, even your shoes. I would highly encourage you to be more intentional about what you wear on the days that you're preaching, because I think it's helped me and I think it'll help you.
Couple things to add or questions for you, and I was almost gonna frame this as a joke, but on kind of a serious note, there are people obviously that don't think that it's what's comfortable that matters. That you're in the house of the Lord, you should, especially as a pastor, you should be dressing a certain way. What do you think?
Well, again,
obviously there are different schools of thought.
Right. So, like, if you have a conviction to do something, then you should do it.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, you're probably not kind of in the suit and tie, whatever. But even if you are in an environment that you're supposed to wear something where you might necessarily like, you could probably still pick things that you like within that style.
Yeah.
If you're planning a church, you probably have more say in that. But again, whatever style that is, what makes you feel the most comfortable that's also not distracting is, for me, I've just found it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I've kind of lived by this when it comes to public speaking for a while, because, like, for example, if I'm, whether it's preaching or doing something else, my wife will, in the morning, will be like, hey, this whatever, it looks good, you should wear this. But I know if it's not comfortable, and like you said, even if it's something that no one would notice but me,
and even if it looks good, if you don't like it, it makes a difference.
All I know is I'm going to be thinking about, I guess I should put it this way, I want the least amount of distractions as possible for myself if I'm trying to communicate to people. So if I know, like, yeah, these are fine, but I mean, I don't know, maybe this isn't a good thing to think, but I'm kind of self-conscious because it's kind of tight or it's kind of loose. I don't want to be thinking about that. Right. And so I'd rather wear something that's maybe a little bit more plain or a little bit not as nice looking if it means I'm not going to be thinking about it throughout the day.
And if you preach every week, it's a little bit more difficult because you can't wear the same two or three things
every week. Yeah.
And so I'm not saying go and spend a ton of money, but like be cognizant of that. There, I said it the right way.
There you go.
And when you're buying new clothes or whatever, like, this costs a few extra bucks more, but it's like if you do this a lot, you don't want to always be picking the same 2 shirts because you don't like the rest of the ones that you have. So trying to find stuff that you're comfortable with makes a big difference when you're preaching. So that's number 1, preaching clothes you are comfortable with. Number 2, meet with people on your time. Now, I won't go into all of this. If you go back a few episodes to episode 112, I don't know how many, 5 or 6 reasons we talked about how basically you should meet with people when it works best for you. And I know that might sound selfish, so I say go back and work on that episode, but I would just say this here. that when you're the most creative, when it works best for you. So you want to be able to plan your week and have some sort of rhythm. Now you can have openings. So I think in that episode we said for me, so Wednesday and Thursday from noon on is typically when I meet with people. So I always kind of know it's available. But every morning I have scheduled Mondays and Tuesdays. So it's like I basically know what I'm doing. So it makes my schedule a lot better, and I'm not always running around all over the place. But meeting people on your time, and even with your staff, to the best. I mean, you have to be flexible, obviously, but don't feel bad about doing a schedule that works for you, because if you listen to that episode, we talk about how it's actually best for your church.
Yeah. I won't add a whole lot because we don't need to take time repeating it, but go back and listen to the episode. But I think just hearing that advice on the surface can sound very, you think you're better than other people or whatever. But go back and listen, because I think we lay out pretty well that it's really better for not just you, but for them as well, and really better just for everybody getting things done and being more efficient to actually give people a time to meet with.
So again, I've done that more this year, been more intentional about when I am and am not available, and it just makes my week feel much better.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend doing that. So episode 112 for more there. Number 3 is also set a schedule, has to kind of do with this, but set a schedule that works for you. I remember for the longest time, and I still I'm not nearly as bad about this as I used to be, but I used to feel guilty that, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever, I'm supposed to be working. Mm-hmm. And then if I didn't have a lot going on, whatever that day, then I'd feel guilty. Of course, if I went home and worked all day, all night, it's fine.
Yeah, right.
Because like your schedule's a little different. You have events, you have people that call you and want to meet last minute. Like, it's okay that you don't have a typical 9 to 5 schedule. And so set a schedule that works for you, which means if you're more of an early riser, and there's maybe not a lot of benefits in terms of like, house or car or health insurance, big benefits, or like, there's not a lot of, what I'm trying to say, like monetary benefits to being in ministry, unless you have a big church.
Yes.
In a typical way that you would for most other jobs, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that's hopefully a little more flexible for you is your time. And so if you're an early riser and you work 7 to 3 or whatever, like, don't feel guilty about that. Or if you've got stuff going on all night, you can go in a little bit later. Set a schedule that works for you. If you want to work out in the morning, work out in the morning. If you want to work out in the middle of the day, if you want to work out in the evening, like, don't feel the pressure to conform to what's you're supposed to do, because your schedule is a lot more all over the place than most people. So find when works best for you, when you're most productive, and lean into that. Again, I used to feel guilty in the beginning because I'm like, I have to be working 9 to 5 and then doing all the extra stuff. And it just wasn't a good rhythm or balance for me or my family. So setting a schedule, finding what works for you, and not feeling guilty about it is a really big thing.
Yeah. I think this is especially hard if you haven't worked in ministry your whole life. If you have, maybe you're used to it, but I think especially like for myself, coming from, I worked in mostly offices before working here, and this is my first actual job in ministry for the past few years. It was hard because it's always been a very structured, and I'm a very structured person. Like, it's always been hard because it's always been a very structured time that I go in at the same time. I leave at the same time. I take my breaks at the same time. Like, I like things to be like that. And so it's been hard to kind of maneuver that around, especially my wife's on staff as well. So if we have something that's going on in the evening, like a event, or we have community group, obviously, one evening, to then go in later that day, it took a while for me to be like, okay, that's okay. Because it was like, for a while, I was sitting there in the morning waiting for it to go, because obviously we ride together, just like waiting. Like, it's work time. This is the time I'm supposed to be working. Yep. But it just takes a little bit of getting used to. Like, for example, when we first started coming here full time, this kind of works around it, but you schedule your break. Obviously, you're like eating lunch. And the first like few weeks or whatever, on Dylan's lunch, little inside baseball for you, he watches ESPN. So
ESPN First Take.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Sports shows.
So a certain point of the day, I kept hearing ESPN going, and I'm like, it's work time. And so I'd go over and be like, what are you doing? But I mean, he scheduled that in, and so it's fine to take a break because it all worked around his schedule. So
yeah, and even one last thing, like even working out, you've seen me do this. I've changed from the morning to the middle afternoon now, or to the like right after lunch or right before lunch, and now I'm at the afternoon. So right after this, at 3:45, I'm leaving to go to the gym because I found that I work better in the morning, and so I'm doing all this stuff. I'm getting to the church earlier, leaving earlier, and not feeling guilty about it. Just a big thing. So know what works for you. Actually work hard, so don't work 20 hours a week.
Right.
I don't think that's most church planters' problems. Yeah. But set a schedule, find a schedule, and be flexible. Change things. Try to hone in what works best for you because it'll be most productive.
It's good.
Number 4, let people do what you aren't good at. In other words, you don't have to do everything. And if you see someone who is good at something or has an interest in something, like let them do it. Mm-hmm. Nobody really likes to like someone who's like thinks they can do everything, because everybody knows like this person's like, you're not fooling anybody by doing everything.
Yeah.
And so just giving things away, if you want your church to grow and you want to reach more people, you or one or two people can't do everything.
Yeah.
And I would even say being intentional about asking people and giving things away before they even like come to you. Like if you see something in somebody, a lot of people often will want to do stuff, but they'll feel like I'm not qualified, or I don't have the training or the experience or the education. But being intentional about giving things away and then not feeling guilty about it. That was one of the things for me. We've been really blessed. We've got 5 staff, and so especially earlier on, it was like, well, what am I supposed to do if they do this? Because I felt like I had to do all of the normal stuff that all church planters do.
Right.
But if you can do what you're best at, not feeling guilty about that and letting other people do things. One of the things I've just seen that's really prohibits the health of a church, the growth of a church, is somebody feeling like they have to do everything. Whatever the motivation is, just don't do that.
Yeah. We talked about this for a while as a staff, and was it Michael Hyatt's? Is it Free to Focus that talks about this a lot?
Yeah, we talked about it this summer.
Right, yeah. So Michael Hyatt, Free to Focus, that book talks about it a lot, which is good.
Yeah.
But I think it's good advice, and it's hard, especially because the things that you want to give away, obviously, are things that you don't want to do, so you assume that other people don't want to do them as well. For example, I do a lot of our video editing here at New City, and there's a guy who wanted to help out a lot, and it's just because of different schedules and because I'm not a video editor by trade, it's just all been learned. I wasn't really sure how to actually have him help because I needed it to work on my schedule, honestly, because I had to get things done by a certain time. So I was trying to figure out the best way to do it. And after us like talking and figuring it out, found out the part of the editing that he really likes to do is the worst part. Like it's just cutting things down and trimming it and kind of fitting it in a time frame. And then like the more creative and editing stuff, he's like, I don't really care about that. So I was like, I don't even understand why you'd want to do that, but please. And it's been a huge help. So just things like that where we can just assume that people like and don't like the same things that we do, when in reality it's just really not the case.
And you don't have to be miserable. Like sometimes it feels like if you're doing stuff that you really enjoy, it doesn't feel like necessarily work. So then you feel guilty because you're not doing other things. But like if you're doing what you're good at and other people are doing what they're good at, it leads to the most amount of fruit.
Yeah.
And so let people do what you aren't good at. And like you said, Brian, don't assume that just because you don't like to do something that someone else doesn't like to do something. There is somebody that likes to do everything.
Right.
We all like to do different things. So there is somebody that likes to do what you hate. And then lastly, know why you need to say no. In other words, we know that we can't do everything, but maybe you end up saying yes to more things than you should because you haven't made a commitment or you don't know why you can't do everything. So like for Christine and I, for example, we have a limit to how many nights out. I mean, we've got 2 young kids as well. Because it was up to us. We both like to be around people. We do stuff every night. And we would just be burned out super quick.
Yeah.
And so we have a limit to how many nights out we can be doing things a week. Which means so for us, it's typically 2. Sometimes it's 3, just depends on it. Our kids are pretty young, but they both love to be out. And so for us, it's typically 2 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week. But that's it. And so knowing that when people say, hey, can we get dinner this week? Or can Christina do this? Or can Dylan do this? Like we can say no up front because we know why we're saying no, because we have to, our family's important. We don't want our kids to feel like we're never around, like we always have to do something.
Yeah.
And again, they're a little young now. They're 4 and 1, so they probably wouldn't necessarily think that. But the habits we create now stick with us. And so we want to say, you need to know why you're going to say no to certain people. In other words, know your convictions, know what you want to do, know your schedule. This is why scheduling is so important, so that you don't end up saying yes to everything and then regretting it later. Yeah,
and I think knowing why to say no is helpful because it helps you communicate why you're saying no to other people, instead of just saying, no, this isn't going to work for me without giving any qualifier, any reason. Obviously, you don't always have to. You have to have boundaries, and you don't always have to explain yourself, I guess. But to actually tell people why this isn't going to work, I think helps them understand why things don't work, and then helps kind of figure out a new way, whether it's scheduling a new day or a new way of doing something or something like that.
Yeah, like so for example, for us on Saturdays, it's kind of more of our Sabbath. Christina and I, with our kids, are trying to be more intentional about doing things that we actually wanted to do. So every once in a while, it's not every Saturday, but the vast majority of Saturdays, we're going to say no to things. So for example, if someone from the church we want to have someone over for dinner, someone invites over for dinner, if it's more of like a church thing than a friend thing, we'll say no.
Yeah.
And we'll reschedule it for another time because we know why we're saying no. So it's not just like, we feel guilty, whatever. It's just you've got to be better about protecting what you're doing because you're in it for the long haul, not for just a year or two. And so if you can understand why you're saying no to certain things, I hope that makes sense. It makes it easier to say no and also reschedule whatever it is for the future.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're trying to schedule something with somebody, so like as the person trying to schedule something with you, if you just give them a no or no, it doesn't work for me, without any qualifier, it can come across as very like, "Ooh, I don't know if I should try and should I try and reschedule something else, or is it, do you just not want to be meeting with me or something like that?" So giving something like that, or even offering a different solution, I think helps kind of preserve
again,
that relationship a bit too.
I keep using the same example, but like Christina, we want to have someone over. We want to meet with someone from the church, and they offer like a certain time this coming week. We can say no because we know what we got scheduled, but then we can immediately say, hey, this week doesn't work out, but obviously this is important, so you don't want to blow people off. How about next week? Or how about in 2 weeks? Or how about in 3 weeks? Like, it's okay to schedule something for more than a week away, because if you just know that's just what life is, because you know why you're saying no, it makes it easier to have a healthy schedule and rhythm in your life.
It's good.
So those are 5 surprising random tips that I've learned over the past 5
tips.
years that have been good for us, and I'm still learning. But thanks for being with us. As always, practicalplanting.com. You can get the show notes from all these episodes.
Yeah.
Even submit questions for a future episode. And thanks for being with us. We'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planting. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planting. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planting, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planting on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.